Hi, third grade teachers. My name is Catherine, and today we're going to be talking about the quadrant analysis protocol for analyzing images. The objective of today's lesson is to understand the importance of image analysis, to learn a specific protocol for analyzing images, and then to explore some sample lessons that incorporate image analysis. Now, there are several next-gen learning standards that this image analysis protocol covers. You can pause here if you'd like to read more about them. There are also some New York State social studies framework standards that are also covered. Now, there are different strategies for analyzing images. You could use the image analysis tool, you could use the thinking about images routine, the See, Think, Wonder routine, but today in particular, we're going to be focusing on the quadrant analysis protocol. So what is the quadrant analysis protocol and what are its steps? Well, it was originally adapted from a National Archives and Records Administration lesson plan for analyzing photographs. And the way the National Archives and Records Administration describes it is as follows. You take a printed copy of an image, fold it into 4 parts, and cut along the fold lines. However, there are other ways to do this. Then you'd write the numbers 1 through 4 on the back. If you're projecting the image, let's say on your smartboard or in a live Zoom session, you can also use a text box to cover up the other 3 quadrants or crop the image into 4 quadrants so you can display it one at a time. You're going to look at one section of the photograph at a time, keeping the rest of the picture hidden. And you're going to ask students to look closely at the area that's revealed and describe what they see in the photograph. This will draw their attention to the details of the photograph in that specific area, really slow them down. Now, then you're going to explain to students that to complete the analysis, they look closely by breaking it up. And you can model thinking aloud to give a complete quadrant analysis and give students the opportunity to try it along with you. You might want to invite students to discuss any conclusions that maybe they've drawn based on their analysis. And as they share, you can guide the discussion with questions. There's also a great graphic organizer that you can find through the Teach Hub resources, where children will write down what they observe in each quadrant after they've studied it in its 4 parts. And they'll write down people, the objects, the activities, and then think about questions they might have after analyzing. Now, there are some different instructional models you can use when teaching a lesson with quadrant analysis. For example, you might want to use a quick images routine where you display one quadrant of the image, keep the rest hidden, and ask students to take a minute to observe it and think about what they see. And then you remove the image and ask them to write down everything they remember. After a few minutes, you then ask students to share their findings. You might also want to use quadrant analysis in a station teaching model. So you could have a series of images for analysis and divide students into groups that'll each analyze one image using the quadrant analysis protocol. After their initial or first quadrant analysis, you could reorganize the group so that there's one expert on each image in each group or station coming together, almost like a jigsaw. Each expert would then share information about the image they analyzed from their previous grouping. And you could have them rotate and continue the rotations until all students have had the opportunity to analyze all images or hear from the experts. Lastly, you could use quadrant analysis in an independent work activity or as a formative assessment even. Have them observe, record, question, and you can use it to see what they understand, see what new information they gained from an image, etc. Now, before I had said you're going to want to use questions to guide student discussion. So here are some questions that you might ask while using the quadrant analysis. What's happening in this image? Have you seen this image before? What does this image make you think about? What questions do you have about this image? What do you see? Observe all the parts. What are 2 words that describe this image? Or even, where do you think we could find out more information about the people or objects in the photo? Now, in the social studies curriculum, in the passport curriculum, there are lots of lessons that are ripe for incorporating the quadrant analysis and some that flat out direct you to use it. So for example, during the case study of China, there's a lesson on the Grand Canal and the Great Wall. And this lesson is all about children exploring China's human-made features. For example, the Grand Canal and the Great Wall. You start out by teaching kids a little bit about what a human-made feature is, and that the Great Wall and the Grand Canal are both human-made features. And then you dive into looking at these images. Now, this would be a great time to carefully look through the image by looking at it one quadrant at a time. And then there are some questions to prompt student thinking about this image of the Great Canal. Same goes for an image of the Great Wall of China. Again, looking at this image quadrant by quadrant will really emphasize the length, the complexity of the Great Wall, the geographical features surrounding the Great Wall. It's just really a great tool for examining and analyzing. Now, afterwards, students continue to discuss human-made features, and I want to show you another lesson that's from the first unit in the Passport curriculum for 3rd grade, where you're looking at culture by studying Margaret Mead. This lesson is all about anthropology and introducing the study of anthropology as a way to interpret primary and secondary sources. So kids first understand a bit of the definition of what a cultural anthropologist does, and you review what a primary source is. And then you have them look at some images. Now, these are images of Margaret Mead, world famous cultural anthropologist in Papua New Guinea. And these are great for using the quadrant analysis as well, because there are many details that you might not notice if you're just glancing over the image and not really focusing in on its parts and all the details within. There are children in the background, there's vegetation, there's a house, there are even different details on the clothing and dress in this second image. And then based on your analysis, kids are thinking about the culture of the people in those photographs. So really doing the work of a cultural anthropologist. Lastly, there's another lesson from the case study on Nigeria, where you're thinking about resources important to Nigeria's economy. And so children will look at some images. Here are a few, which would be great for using the quadrant analysis. Again, there's a lot going on in these images that they could really carefully examine. And then they think about the types of items that could be produced from agriculture and manufacturing. And they answer a few questions about it as well. In summary, analyzing images using a protocol like the quadrant analysis really encourages students to focus on details. It draws attention to details in a source. It's a great way to encourage students to use historical evidence from a primary source like a photograph or a piece of art to gain a contextual understanding. Think about the context in which that photograph is taking place, and to make sense of different events or ideas of the past, thinking about a particular culture or thinking about a community in the world as a whole. And lastly, it helps students make connections and predictions based on the images displayed. So like we saw when we were looking at the images of Margaret Mead, you can really understand the work of a cultural anthropologist by analyzing those images. So it really helps students connect what they're doing in practice to what they're learning about the content specifically. I hope you will encourage your kids to use the quadrant analysis and you'll try it out in a social studies lesson. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.